It's.
All right.
This is
We're
why.
gonna come to order. Hold.
Sensible shit. I couldn't hear you, Paul. Did you ask for roll call?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Please say, let me know if you are here, or if I call a name and you're here to represent them. Amanda Archer, that she is unable to attend today. Ashley Hathaway, here. Blythe Post, here. Faith Dayton, here. Jeanette Ornelas, Hannah Nanez, or anyone with the city of Fort Bragg. Not hearing any. Joanne Brewer. Here. Joanna Olson. Here. Judy Albert. Here. Emil Leggett. Priest Martinez. Travis Wright. Or anyone with Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority. Teresa DeSimone. Here. Paul Davis.
Here.
Alice Langdon Sloan.
Present.
Dan McIntyre, Brianna Ramirez, or anyone with NCO. Dan said he's not able to attend. I didn't know if he had a second. Denise Gorney. Here. Diana Billy Elliott. Christina Castorena, or anyone with Indigenous Wellness Alliance. I have that. Donald Damp.
Here.
Jacqueline Williams. Or Drew Yakmini Hare, or anyone with 4th Street Project. Janie Smith. Here. Jennifer Cook. Here. Unfortunately, Jennifer, we can't call you towards the quorum because I didn't get advance notice. We can count you here, but we can't count you in the quorum. Okay. Per Brown Act. Karen Lovato. Here. Kate Mather. Matt McMullen.
Here.
Oh, hi, Matt.
Hi.
Noemi Guerrero, or anyone with Mendocino Community Health Clinics. 14, we have a quorum, barely, but we do.
Veronica. All right, we're gonna move on to public comment. Anyone has any comments on non-agenda items?
I'd like to just say one thing. We had talked at our, maybe this last meeting, probably a Shelter Solutions Committee meeting, about the Avenues to Wellness speaker series in Willits, and that they were wanting us to consider doing an event for them related to our shelter action group and our activities. And we have all determined that we are not experts on homelessness and don't feel like we have any business presenting that to the community. However, we very much want the subject presented. And I did put that out to the people that were here. I can't remember which meeting it was, but Veronica. And there was some suggestion that maybe the COC would be interested in putting something like that on for the city of Willits and surrounding areas to educate the community on what is happening with homelessness in our community and the barriers that exist to housing, including behavioral health and recovery issues and all of it. So we just felt that we weren't in the position to speak on that at all. We're trying to get some services going, but so I just want to put that out there as a thought for the COC to do that kind of presentation as part of the wellness series, speaker series, Avenues to Wellness speaker series, out of Adventist Health in Howard. Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Now we're gonna move on to approval of minutes. This is for the July 21st, 2025 full membership meeting.
For the minutes purposes, Hannah Manis has joined us and I have updated our attendance to include her. Thanks for coming from Fort Ridge.
Everyone's had a chance to review those if I could get it.
I'm moving to approve the July 21st meeting. So the CO2.
Second.
Thank you, Dawn.
Comments, corrections? If not, Veronica, can you take the vote?
Yeah, state says so. When I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain to approving the minutes. Ashley Hathaway. Yes. Blythe Post.
Abstain.
Faith Dayton.
Abstain.
Hannah Manis. Abstain. Joanne Brewer.
Yes.
Joanna Olson.
Yes.
Judy Albert.
Yes.
Teresa Di Simone.
Yes.
Alice Langdon Sloan.
Abstain.
Denise Gorney.
Yes.
Donald Dale.
Yes.
Jamie Smith.
Yes.
Karen Lovato.
Abstain.
Matt McMullen.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, thanks, Veronica. We're gonna move on to announcements. Does anyone? I don't know if this is the right spot. I just want to put in a plug for more participation. Some of our committee meetings are lacking a little bit. You know, recently we didn't have enough folks to actually do business at a committee meeting.
HMIS committee.
HMI committee. These things are important.
It's a requirement of all members, not just board members, to be active on a minimum of one committee. So if you aren't actively involved in a committee, reach out to me and I'll get you plugged in.
Any other announcements? We're gonna move on to reports and presentations. Starting with a guest presentation from Karen Lovato. Take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Karen Lovato, and I am the Deputy of Operations with Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. I will be talking today about the transformation of Mental Health Services Act to Behavioral Health Services Act, so MHSA to BHSA, and also the Behavioral Health Bridge Housing program that's sort of an augment to help with that transition, and then also some impacts related to CARE Act. I think it's been months, maybe a little bit roughly more, 6 to 8 months since the last time I came. So it's sort of an update from the last COC presentation that I gave on some of these changes. The Behavioral Health Service Act transformation was voted on through Proposition 1 in 2024. And as it passed, the changes are to reorganize and reprioritize the funding of Mental Health Services Act. Mendocino County, currently, a lot of our funding goes to contracted providers in the community, community-based organizations. both those who are providing specialty mental health services and also community-based organizations who don't provide specialty mental health services, but maybe provide gap funding or services, prevention funding or services, pretty much a wide variety of wraparound services from both the severe and chronic specialty spectrum to the early intervention and prevention level of spectrum. The voter request through passage of Proposition 1 shifts the focus of funding from a very broad range of services focus in Mental Health Services Act to putting the emphasis on funding into the highest needs spectrum. So the funding focus shifts from a lot of a broader based service provision to much more specialty end services, higher intensity services for folks who are not engaging and or ending up in institutionalization or at risk of institutionalization because of their behavioral. So one of the biggest obvious changes with the shift from Mental Health Services Act to Behavioral Health Services Act is the Mental Health to Behavioral Health. Behavioral Health Services Act, which will start officially, even though a lot of the preparatory work has been underway for this past year, will officially start next June. And the behavioral piece is to really officially state that the Behavioral Health Services Act funding can go to those with substance use disorder needs, in addition to those with mental health issues and concerns. Historically, Mental Health Services Act was able to serve those with substance use needs if they also had a mental health condition that qualified them for the services. So this makes it official that there's no necessity for full diagnosis or co-occurring disorders. Behavioral Health Services Act will fund programs that are both mental health alone, substance use disorder treatment alone, and co-occurring programs, but they will need to be in one of the three new funding categories and serving those with the more severe and chronic needs and diagnoses and challenges. So for those who didn't know, Mental Health Services Act was broken down into categories called community service and supports. Those were more severe and chronic full service partnership type programs, housing support programs, programs like wellness centers and outreach engagement programs, cultural responsiveness programs. Then there were prevention and early intervention programs that had 7 subcategories. I'm not going to list them all for you because they're not as important anymore now that we're transitioning. But a lot of these were cultural outreach engagement programs, access and connection to treatment programs, general prevention programs, a lot of young adult or family-based programs that were sort of very low threshold, low criteria necessary to get services because they were really aimed at support individuals at the earlier end of the spectrum of experiencing mental health symptoms. We also had a lot of outreach for recognition of signs and symptoms of programs and destigmatization programs. The new 3 categories are, number 1 is housing. 30% of the funding that comes to the county will be dedicated towards housing. Of that funding, 50% will be prioritized for individuals with chronic homelessness. And up to 25% can be reallocated with stakeholder support into the development of capital development, rental subsidies, and family housing. 35% will be full service partnerships. So historically, the community services and supports category was 80% of the total overall funding, and 50% of the 80% needed to be spent on full service partnerships. Now, full service partnership is its entire standalone category, and it's 35% of the overall funding that Mendocino County gets. This is a program that's meant to be for individuals who really are at risk of institutionalization, history of hospitalizations, history of incarcerations, history of conservatorship, folks who really need a more wraparound 24/7 approach, unusual strategies, whatever it takes kind of mentality to help wrap around the person and help them overcome the barriers that are getting in the way of treatment. All of these services are voluntary, so the person does have to be willing to engage in the treatment services in order for them to receive the services. These are not involuntary programs, and involuntary programs cannot be funded by Behavioral Health Services Act, which was also true for Mental Health Services Act. There's some gray area for court-related programs that are not necessarily, they are still voluntary, but they can be sort of like as a condition of criminal justice involvement. So there's some gray area with those that I can talk about if necessary. The third category is a new term. It's a new type of category for the Behavioral Services Act, and it's called Behavioral Health Services and Supports. So that is essentially everything else that MHSA used to be, plus the addition of the substance use component. So unfortunately, that's quite a large variety and degree of service programs that are just now squeezed into a 35% category. So this could be early intervention programs, outreach and engagement programs, workforce development programs, training programs, cultural responsiveness programs, capital facilities development, technological development, innovation projects. There's a number of things that we had funded historically that were their own component. Now all of those fit under the 35% behavioral health services and supports program. And so if they're not a housing program and they're not a full service partnership program, there's 35% of the MHSA funding that remains available to those. Critical and very important for anybody who's interested in this funding is all 3 RFPs are currently open for the next 3-year funding cycle. MHSA, BHSA does funding for programs in 3-year cycles. We can make adjustments annually, year by year, but ultimately we look at in each 3-year cycle, we look at the next 3 years, what are the priorities from stakeholders, whether those are state stakeholders or local stakeholders, and we prioritize how we fund within each of these components based on the bidders that we get and the priority populations identified by the stakeholders.
Karen, when you said all
Yeah.
3, do you mean that there's a housing RFP, an FSP RFP, and a behavioral health services and support?
Correct. There are
Okay.
3 separate, one for each component. Within those components, if you are interested in bidding, please designate the types of services you'll be doing because of course, behavioral health services supports is a combination of.
That's super wide. The other ones are.
Yes, very, very broad.
And sorry, historically, roughly how much funding has Mendocino received for MHSA every year?
So
You
we
could do a ballpark.
ballpark $4 million on average. $4 million on average annually, and it's a millionaire's tax, so it's 1% on millionaires in the state of California. So it varies pretty wildly, and the projections tend to be wild as well in variation. We do have probably more than that at this point. We definitely have more than that at this point because we have some underspending that's been happening and rolling forward since COVID with some MHSA providers who've been struggling with capacity and unable to completely expand their contracts. And so we have been looking to expand and fill some of the needs that haven't been met by our existing providers. So that, but that is an average ballpark, and that's usually what we like to budget off of until we get more reliable projections. Anything else question-wise before I keep motor mouthing? Okay. So that's BHSA. There are some notable changes, especially for existing providers who were in categories like innovation projects or early intervention prevention type programs, because there really isn't designated funding for those anymore. So that is something that we are hoping that our existing service providers are able to either adapt or find other grant funding. And that's harder now than it has been for a really long time. But the increase in dedicated housing funding really had to come from somewhere. Overall, the state does tend to have more funding year over year in MHSA, with a few notable exceptions where we just have fewer millionaires or they didn't make as much. So that 1% allocation was quite a bit small. See, I mentioned the 51% needs to be for chronically homeless.
I'm gonna hop in here real quick, Karen.
Yes.
Let folks know that I pulled up the county website and I demonstrated on the recording how to access those RFPs. But if you're on the any county website, if you hover over business and click on open RFP quotes and bids, you can scroll down a little bit on that page and they're the first, second, and fourth ones listed as of right now. So you can go back to this recording if you don't remember.
And we are right now, that'll change if there's new RFPs that open, but for right now, we're the top three on the page. So they're not hard to find right now if you're interested.
Karen, if you remember off the top of your head, what's the deadline for them? Yeah.
Actually, that might be
Thank you.
easier for Veronica to pull up than for me to remember.
They're a little, I think they're all.
November 20th.
11/20. This one is 11/13.
So full service partnership opened a week earlier, so that's November 13th.
November 13th.
2 p.m. Don't be 2:01.
Yeah, don't miss that. We've had to decline ones that come in a few hours late. Really, yeah.
Yeah, from the people who are putting it out, it can be a little frustrating, but
Yeah.
it is not.
Deadline
it
for
is
you.
not- But yes, that, and then there was a pre-bidder conference for the RFP for full service partnership last week, and the request for inquiries closes today. The others are the other two, BHSS and housing, open on, say this right, they are on the 27th, I believe at 11 o'clock. Not sure when their inquiries close, but that's the pre-bidder conference for those.
Ignorant question for Faith. What do you mean by the inquiry is due today?
So if you have a question about the RFP that's not clear in the RFP, you have an opportunity to request. RFPs are very formal bureaucratic processes. I can tell you about them, but I can't answer questions about them. I can speak about BHSA, but I can't speak about what our priorities are in this conversation during the
Gotcha.
RFP. So if you had a question that's not answered in the RFP and you want more details, you answer them formally through an inquiry or by attending the pre-bidder conference. All of those are answered uniformly to everyone who's interested, and they are released on the website as well, once they are answered, so that everybody has the same opportunity. All potential bidders have the same opportunity to get the same information, and there's no side door conversations happening about it.
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome.
I'll show folks where that is just for recording. Keep going.
All right. So that's all very exciting and very real time right now as far as the development of BHSA. Was there a question? Sorry.
No, I'm glad we're having you here.
Yes,
Good time.
very
Yeah.
exciting. It is something to be notable, to be noted that it is a very dramatic change from the past. So there will be some changes for existing providers who are potentially bidding, needing to adjust and find ways to fit themselves into this new module. We have known this is coming for a while, so we've been talking to folks about this, but it's also an opportunity for new providers as well, who maybe didn't quite fit necessarily in one of the other models in the past and will fit under BHSA. Certainly the expansion to be more comprehensively inclusive of SED is an opportunity. I think that's everything I had to say about BHSA. So before I transition on to BHBH, anything about BHSA in general?
Just really quick, was the pre-bidders meeting that was held Thursday, was that recorded?
I would have to check with the MCHSCoC, BHSA team. but
So if you're
I don't
interested in finding
believe
out,
so.
you can reach out to Rena for.
Yes, I don't believe it was.
Information's in here.
I don't believe it was video recorded, but everything that was collected in writing, all the questions, and they won't be responded to until they're all released on the page. But I'm not positive.
So Karen, when they talk about prioritizing housing for the chronically homeless, what form does that take? Does that take the form of vouchers that you hand out? Does it mean, like rapid rehousing? What does it mean?
So it depends on what the proposals end up coming through. We have funded housing through, so Behavioral Health Services Act, even if the expansion is still about behavioral health services. So it does have to, whatever the housing is, has to in some way be for and prioritizing the behavioral health treatment component as well. So there are factors associated with that as well. But historically, MHSA has funded various different housing elements as well. So full service partnership with the wraparound model, full service partnership, provider agencies can use the flexible funds within full service partnership to help with motel vouchers and things like that if people need help overcoming. They've been used to pay deposits for move-in. They've been used to pay for eradication of pests or storage or replacement of
So pretty flexible.
damaged items. They're very FSP flex funds related to housing are very flexible. The housing funds within BHSA are going to be more very specifically for a housing piece. There are a percentage of those funds that can be used for other things that help with move-in costs, but that would probably be more realistically allocated into the FSP flex funds. So there's going to be probably a decent degree of overlap between full service partnership and the MHSA, BHSA housing component. I'm saying both right now, MHSA and BHSA, just because it's a learning curve for everybody to get used to the new acronym, so I apologize. But yes, there may be some programs. We currently have supported housing programs that are funded through MHSA. And so those are places that have some extra funds that are in addition to whatever the individual pays for rent, that helps with some supported housing things that address maybe if it's a collective unit, the collective needs of the housing. If it's an individual unit, maybe some of the extra repair work that needs to be done, or the extra check-in activities that happen that don't necessarily fall under reimbursable specialty mental health direct services. They're more about creating that fully supported wraparound piece.
Always just curious.
Megan cuts me off.
So, and then since now, I mean, substance abuse seems like a huge thing to add on to behavioral. Okay, and so does that mean, I mean, right now, there's a lot of recovery programs that will accept Medi-Cal and et cetera. Does this mean expansion of substance abuse as we know it now? I mean, how do you envision this? Because to me, there's never enough mental health services, but I'm just wondering.
It may, but not necessarily, if that's a gray enough answer for you. So there's funding for what MHSA was always meant to be, was gap funding. This is what is covered under the specialties then mental health services that is reimbursable by Medi-Cal, that is considered under your mental health plan for specialty mental health services. That's augmented by the mild to moderate system, which is done by Partnership Health Plan and usually facilitated by the clinics for the folks who don't have as severe needs. What MHSA was always meant to do from the beginning was to be bridge funding for things that weren't covered by specialty mental health. So since 2005, when MHSA was passed as Prop 63, things have changed in what's covered under specialty mental health. What's covered under specialty SUDT is now we have the waiver for the organized delivery system for drug Medi-Cal services. And so there are Medi-Cal services that are funded currently through that waiver. And so that availability is much bigger. So funding for those services that are reimbursable by Medi-Cal, that's broader than it was when MHSA started. BHSA changing to be inclusive of SUD and SUD only means that services that are maybe not directly treatment oriented and reimbursable under that model, but maybe augment maybe those things like a full service partnership for substance use or a behavioral health, which behavioral health court existed for folks with mental health and substance use previously, but maybe there'll be more folks who have just SUDT issues or folks who maybe need a full service partnership related to FDDC, family dependency drug court, or adult drug court involvement, because there's other things that come with that wraparound service that are not covered by just the treatment modality, the treatment reimbursement through Medi-Cal. So those are some options for expansion. There's some other types of services. I'm just thinking of, we have in current MHSA, we have things like wellness centers that are not Medi-Cal reimbursable services. Those are opportunities for development that are treatment modalities under SUDT that are not Medi-Cal reimbursable, or maybe not, I shouldn't say treatment modalities, but are services that support individuals with these needs that are not necessarily specifically reimbursable treatment insurance covered services. I cover it? Yeah. So it could, but it depends on who bids, how we have to make the prioritization. We have lists of stakeholder meetings. We have every year we have stakeholder meetings where we collect feedback. 2 years ago, we did a very large stakeholder project where we got community feedback and voting on what the top 10 were. Of course, we're Mendocino County. We can't limit ourselves to 10. We have greater needs. So I think it ended up being a top 12 needs that are part of that prioritization process. So those are some of the ways that as we collect the applications and the bids, we will help prioritize what gets funded. We obviously have to fall within the state funding criteria and components. And then from there, we go to the local stakeholder prioritizations amongst that, and then we just see how much competition there is and whether or not we get applications for each of the subcategories, because we have to have all the subcategories. So that creates a little bit of challenge as well. If we don't get a bidder for a particular category, which has happened in the past, how do we go about that through the exception to bid process? Because we have to have all the minimum mandates, but we don't necessarily, have always enough to spread around in all of the places. If we've got a really popular, everybody wants to do this, but nobody wants to do that, we have to make difficult decisions sometimes. Anything else on that? All
Real
right.
quick,
Yep.
you have a question real quick. What is the demographic of the population, like the age range? Like, does it include youth or is it all for adults?
It absolutely does. So in MHSA, prior to the transformation of BHSA, and this will continue with BHSA, full service partnerships, and really the way that we track our data on everyone served within MHSA, BHSA is by age category. There's 4 age groups that we categorize, 0 to 15, which is children and families, 16 to 25, transition age youth, 26 to 59, which is adults, and then older adults or elders, 60 plus. And so full service partnerships will definitely be broken down into those categories. A potential provider or potential bidder could pick one or all of the ages to serve, depending on their area of expertise and specialty. But we, from the county perspective, need to serve all ages. And often that 0 to 15 is a family-based program. So there's a lot of full service wraparound that's expected for the family that may not be that direct Medi-Cal reimbursable service, because not all of those services would necessarily fall under the treatment modality. So it's that wraparound piece. And so there's a lot more that could potentially come in through that. Did I answer that, Camille?
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
And I have a real quick question. Is it HUD's definition of chronic homelessness or the state's?
I believe it's the states. Actually, I probably should double check on that. I believe it's the states. And yeah, I should probably check on that and get back to you. But it is again within that also prioritizing those with those high needs chronic
Do they
mental health and
include
substance
the
use.
at risk of chronic homelessness in that, the way that they did?
They usually do. MHSA definitely did. I believe BHSA does. Yes.
What that means, but okay. Right.
So just that's a great helpful transition for me into BHBH. So thank you for that. Because for the most part, behavioral health bridge housing, which is what BHBH stands for, is a short-term grant allocation funding. It's actually been in effect for about 2 years now, and it will end in 2027. It's meant to be a bridge between the housing component of BHSA and also the implementation of the CARE Act. Individuals who are in assisted outpatient treatment, which we've had since 2014, and CARE Act have as part of being in the program, an expectation that if they need housing, that they will be offered housing through this program. So the county has, for some time, had contracts related to supported housing for people who are in assisted outpatient treatment. And now that we implemented CARE last December, have had that available to potential CARE Act recipients. We have not had CARE Act recipients until just recently, and we still have under 11. So I'm not going to disclose how many we have. So that's a very new process, but they do have the option of having housing made available to them. So that is something that's already been in existence, but BHBH was grant funding that would both expand housing options for those who didn't already qualify under MHSA for housing supports, like those that I've been talking about, full service partnership wraparound, housing deposits, short-term shelter housing, and various things like that. And the care component, and CARE's, I did present a little bit on this last time, but I'm going to give just like a really as fast as I can. It's a therapeutic court that is non-criminal. It's a civil court process where individuals who have schizophrenia or schizophrenia spectrum disorders can go through a therapeutic court process. Again, no criminal charges necessary, to have the judge oversee their treatment plan. It's been, as with assisted outpatient treatment, shown to help those individuals who maybe struggle with believing or listening to their regular treatment team or their family members about their need for treatment. They might be more likely judge somebody in that position of authority, that position of the bench, telling them this is important and necessary for their well-being and staying out of other institutional risks, they might be more willing to do that if the judge is holding everyone accountable, not just the individual in treatment, but the treatment providers, the family members who are supporting them through the process, accountable for their pieces of the treatment agreement. And so it's a formal process. It's got a pretty specific criteria that's necessary. It's very court oriented. You have to go through, an individual would have to file a petition to the court in order to request somebody that they thought qualified in that criteria. That petition then comes to the county to verify that there's qualifying diagnosis or a suspected qualifying diagnosis. And then we go through a whole process, but it is an 18-month or a year to 18 months with potential for a small extension program to really monitor that. It's a least restrictive, like so many services are. If the person doesn't need the court process to engage in treatment, then obviously we're not going to put them through that extra level of hurdles to go through. But for those folks who are just really struggling, they maybe recognize it is, again, a voluntary program. They recognize they need help, but they're really just struggling to remember and recognize, because one of the main symptoms of schizophrenia and schizophrenia spectrum is not recognize that they in fact are ill.
Karen, do we have a practicing judge that it's overseeing those cases right now?
We do, yes, Judge Norman. Judge Norman's court. Many of those therapeutic courts have are similarly overseen. No, I am.
This is the petition form for Mendocino County. It's
Yeah.
available on the court's website.
There are different forms. It is available. There's also the self-help group at the courthouse is available to help individuals and family members to go through that process if needed. And we have our assisted outpatient treatment liaison and myself, so Melinda Driggers and myself are also both able to answer questions. Melinda's going to be our airport liaison as well, since there's so much similarity between assisted outpatient treatment and care.
I heard you say it's voluntary, but if it's court, it's really not voluntary, right?
It is, because it's not criminal court, it's civil. So the family member or agency provider can say, I think this person needs this service. They can fill out the petition, the court will review it and find out if it meets criteria from their perspective. Then they send it to behavioral health. We make sure that the diagnostic criteria is met because that's a requirement as well. And then the first court hearing is usually a conversation about the individual's willingness to participate in this process. So the person is saying, I'm willing to have my treatment overseen by the courts. I'm willing to go through this process of reporting to the judge and the court around what's going on with me. They do have a public defender who can help talk them through what this means. It's not criminal. There's no criminal consequences. Ultimately, the consequences are the same as anyone else who's in mental health treatment or substance use treatment in this case, because care is, again, a behavioral health program, not just one or the other, but both. So if they are not successful or not willing to seek treatment, there's really no consequence unless they meet the criteria of meeting involuntary 5150 or other involuntary criteria. But it's another tool in the toolbox to try to help engage folks who are really struggling with engagement, maybe putting another authority in place to say, hey, I really think you need this. I really think this is going to benefit you. So that's care. And so behavioral health bridge housing is meant to be an augment to housing to help address immediate housing and treatment needs for those individuals with severe and chronic mental health or substance use issues who are unsheltered, at risk of being unsheltered. So that's where the risk comes into place. VHVH definitely includes that. And helping to meet those housing needs to help bridge. It's a transitional bridge housing in the sense of it bridges between pre-MHSA to VHSA, but also bridging from temporary housing to permanent housing. So this is it is for temporary housing. The funding streams are predominantly shelter motel type vouchers. So short-term placements, we have used SLE under the short-term sober living environments under the short-term housing. We also there is an opportunity for rental assistance with move-in and or eviction prevention costs. And then finally, because of the overlap with care, there is short-term board and care costs for those who are either stepping down from higher levels of institutionalization like LPS, or those who are at risk of LPS who might need a short-term board and care opportunity in order to prevent that. Of those, we have used all except the board and care, or we have contracts in place to use all except the assisted living component. I'm in the process of getting those developed. And mostly that's just because there's just extra contract negotiation that needs to happen for voluntary board and cares, because most of the board and cares we used are used to folks who are conserved and not making their own decisions. So some extra verbiage in place to make sure that we're addressing what happens if the person decides to leave, because again, it's a voluntary process. What are we doing about that? What are we doing with their belongings if they leave them behind? So just some pieces that we need to put in place, but those will all be available for folks who qualify under BHBH. We currently have sort of introductory contracts with these as far as 50,000 allocated for sober living, 50,000 for rental assistance, more variable, flexible as needed for shelters. And then it'll probably be 50,000 starting for board and care that'll need to go higher once we get a sense of how long is actually needed for the board and cares. But we do have the opportunity to increase those before the expiration of the grant, because we have been underutilizing it. It's what's called non-supplementation funding. So if the person has other funding available to them, they're supposed to use that first. You guys are all pretty familiar with that. So that means folks who are already qualified for full service partnership should be using their full service partnership funds for this not BHBH fund. So this is really meant to be filling in those gaps where there isn't existing funds for these folks with mental health and substance use criteria. We are also, because we're we've been under expending this compared to where we thought we would be by now. We have a budget modification request in process. We're hoping to get approval to increase line items for